Offseason workouts are getting heavy out there at Green Tree. Which Miami Hurricanes football players are standing out so far?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're free, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. We're also free on YouTube. We're part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers, join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, guys, it's so great to hear feedback and see photos of Miami Hurricanes players like Ruben Bain out there working out off-season workouts. He's been posting some photos. Ruben also started his own YouTube channel, so I encourage you guys to check that out as well. Seems like he's cooking up some good stuff out there. And of course, there's a lot of people to talk about, from early enrollee freshmen to newcomers through the transfer portal. And so some of the things that have stood out to me so far, some things that I've seen, some things that I've heard, D-Money at CanesInsight.com has provided some really good information about offseason progress so far. Something that stood out to me over the last couple of weeks is seeing photos of TreVonte Citizen out there running, right? TreVonte, who's had some of the worst injury luck. He and Zion Nelson and Elijah Arroyo have had the worst injury luck on the team. But seeing TreVonte out there, he is wearing a big brace over his formerly injured knee. But at this point, I think that's just for his own comfort and his peace of mind. It's pretty common to see players who have had ACL injuries in the past wear braces for years after that. Everything, to my understanding, is that TreVonte Citizen is fully healthy now. He's working on getting that speed and that explosion back that he used to have. Now, something, of course, to keep in mind, like, we're talking about off-season workouts. Like, these are not real practices. Those start on March 4th in spring. These aren't team drills. These are workouts, guys running, guys lifting, guys throwing and catching. So you can only jump to so many conclusions from workouts, but it still is nice to know that these players are out there creating some positive impressions so far. And, sticking on TreVonte Citizen, so for him, he's going to have a good opportunity in spring and hopefully once the season begins in the fall as well, because if there is any doubt that Mark Fletcher is going to be healthy in time for the start of the season, I don't think it's fair to jump to conclusions on that one way or the other, but he did have off-season surgery. So if there is any chance that Fletcher isn't full go by August 31st, Citizen has a great chance to carve out a spot in that running back rotation right now, because physically, when it comes to his characteristics and his size, he's the most similar guy on the team to Mark Fletcher. So Fletcher is definitely going to miss spring football. We know that. We will reassess his condition once fall camp begins, but TreVonte Citizen has got a great opportunity, and what a comeback story that would be. If Citizen can make an impact on the field this coming season, and he absolutely could, of course, but if he can do that, what a comeback story it would be for the guy who's missed the first full 2 seasons of his career due to injury. He was physically well enough to play in the Pinstripe Bowl, but he did not get out there against Rutgers. Chris Johnson and Chris Wheatley-Humphrey, the 2 fastest running backs on the team, are also going to have a major opportunity. Wheatley-Humphrey, by the way, he's enrolled early, so he's on campus now. Jordan Lyle, who's also going to be awesome. He's just not enrolled early, so he's not on campus yet. Now, speaking on the running backs, you've probably heard by now, and it appears to be true, that Rodney Hill is no longer with Miami. The former Florida State running back, who, remember, he committed to Miami a couple weeks ago, he decided to go back to FAMU. FAMU was where he was originally committed after leaving Florida State. Listen, I think it makes sense why he decided to go back to FAMU, because he wouldn't have been on scholarship at Miami. It's going to be a preferred walk-on. Now, that's an expensive thing to be at the University of Miami. He probably got one look at his first tuition bill and ran for the hills, okay? And Hill, I'm not going to lie to you and say that I didn't want him here, because I think he's a really talented running back, and it would have been nice to have him potentially as part of the rotation. But in reality, he would not have likely risen higher than a third or fourth stringer at Miami. So I'm sure he's got more opportunities at FAMU to get on the field. But still, it would have been nice to have Hill's depth just in case of injuries, because we've seen injuries in Miami's running back room just about every year. And it's not just a Miami thing, right? I mean, that's a position you get hit a lot and guys come up with bumps and bruises. So it would have been nice to have had him here. All right. So some awesome information was shared from a guy who I think is one of the best in the business when it comes to reports and info, D-Money at CanesInsight.com. He says that he's heard Judd Anderson and Chris Wheatley-Humphrey both, quote unquote, look like guys who belong, right? That's an assessment being made so far in these spring workouts. A couple of true freshmen. He says that Judd is throwing the ball really well. Now, you guys know how much I believe in friend of the show, Judd Anderson. And I think a lot of Canes fans initially, because, he committed to Miami while he was, I think he just finished his junior season in high school at that time. People judged him from pedestrian stats as a junior. And then many of the same people ignored how impressive his stats were as a senior. He had a really good year this past year. He also changed high schools because he was previously at a high school where there wasn't nearly as much talent around him. And then he transferred to Warner Robins, which is a big program in Georgia. And he looked really good this past year, and he works really hard. D-Money also said that Elijah Lofton, the tight end, may not pass the eye test, but is generating buzz and projects to have a role as a tight end, a fullback, and even a tailback at Miami. Okay, so there you go. We're talking about depth questions in the running back room. In an emergency, Elijah Lofton can fill that role as well. And man, I hope to see Miami's tight end room just bounce back and have a big impact this year, because they didn't have it in the passing game last year. Hopefully when Shannon Dawson gets into that laboratory with Cam Ward and they're designing plays and designing an offense, Miami can find a way to get people like Riley Williams and Elijah Lofton and Jackson Carver and Cam McCormick. Hopefully they can get these guys more involved in that passing game this coming year. He writes, does D-Money that wide receiver JoJo Trader, defensive end Marquise Lightfoot, safety Zaquan Patterson were all described as freaks. He also says that JUCO offensive tackle Markell Bell also got high marks for his physical tools, quote unquote first round traits, but he will still need some seasoning to reach his ceiling. Yeah, Markell Bell, 6'8.5", that dude. He is a giant. And I want to go back to D-Money mentioning JoJo Trader, because hopefully this debunked something that I've seen out there, and I've been getting questions about this. There is this weird conspiracy theory going around among certain Miami fans with the tinfoil hats on who, for whatever reason, didn't believe that JoJo Trader actually enrolled early. Because apparently, nobody had any evidence that he was on campus, but also nobody had any evidence that he wasn't. And people were trying to say, oh, JoJo, is he not there? What's happening? But folks, now I have seen photos of JoJo Trader at workouts. I know he's there. So personally, I feel like the conspiracy around JoJo Trader has been debunked, right? Anybody who thought he wasn't on campus, we now have proof that JoJo Trader, who I think can make an impact in his first year, we now have proof that he is on campus. However, you guys know that I like to be fair. I like all viewpoints, negative, positive, conspiracy or not. I love all viewpoints to be represented on Locked On Canes. This is an equal opportunity platform. So a friend of mine who is in an undisclosed location, he doesn't want anyone to know where he is because apparently agents of foreign governments may be after him, he tells me. A friend of mine who simply goes by Conspiracy Cane. I have Conspiracy Cane on the line, who wants to present a counterpoint on the whereabouts of JoJo Trader. Folks, do not even for a second fall for those deep state fake pictures of Joshisa Trader. I have it on good authority that those were deep fakes planted by Mike Norvell and other globalists like Billy Napier from the radical coaching left elsewhere in the state of Florida. Hold on. I'm feeling some static. I think they may have found me. They may have found this transmission. Please, for those listening to this, you are the resistance. He's got a pretty nice living room for such a secret, low-key transmission. So I don't know if Billy Napier tracked his location or what happened, but maybe sometime we'll hear again from Conspiracy Kane. But I think he's wrong. I think JoJo Trader is in fact on campus, and I think we now have the proof of that. Speaking of running backs, we were talking about running backs before. Jordan Lyle is getting a ton of love, not only from Don Solinger, who joined us yesterday. Jordan Lyle is getting love. Lyle, he's getting love from the national media as well. Also, you've got a trio of Miami players participating in Senior Bowl practices this week. What's the early feedback on Cam Kinchens, James Williams, and Javion Cohen? I don't know why I couldn't think of the third guy there. Good feedback, some good, some bad. We'll talk about it right here. Guys, we're only getting started. Keep it locked on this episode of Locked On Canes. And I'm only getting started on FanDuel. My goodness, guys, this is the time. 'Tis the season to be part of FanDuel. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because if you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3, because not only can you bet on who's going to win Super Bowl 58, 49ers are 1.5 favorites against Kansas City, but FanDuel also has bets for things like which player will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. Guys, I love the prop bets, player props. You could even get which way is the coin toss going to go, how long is the national anthem going to last. There's so many different things to choose from at FanDuel. New customers, if you join today, you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For the everydayers, you want to take that everydayer experience to the next level? Sign up for our exclusive Locked On Canes Insiders chat. I include a link in the show description below. You can get text messages directly from my phone to yours with breaking news, show scoops, recruiting news, transfer portal news, off-season workout news. You can sign up for free for 14 days. Try it for 14 days. And then if you like it, after 2 weeks, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. Give you a lot of added value on there. Click that link in the show description below to become a Locked On Canes insider. So, it's funny because we've been talking a lot about Jordan Lyle this week. St. Thomas Aquinas running back, Miami signee. He's going to be on the team. I think he's arriving in the summer. We'll see if he can make an impact as a true freshman this coming year, kind of the way that Mark Fletcher did last year. So we talked with legendary Miami Hurricanes running backs coach Don Solinger yesterday, who has had the chance to meet Lyle a couple of times and is super impressed. Not only impressed with the way he runs, I mean, he had over 1,300 yards this past season, 10 yards per carry at St. Thomas Aquinas as a senior, but Solinger also loves his attitude, wants to compete and earn everything he gets out there on that field. And Solinger says that Lyle really has that old school Miami Hurricanes mentality of wanting to go out there and compete, because Miami has, again, a very deep running back room on paper, right? I'm not saying it's as good, but you remember deep running back rooms that Solinger coached where he had Willis McGahee, Clinton Portis, Frank Gore, Najee Davenport, all in the same running back room, and those guys all wanted to go out there and compete. Jordan Lyle has that same sort of attitude. This is a cool accolade for Lyle. So over the past week, all of the recruiting services have released their final player rankings for the class of 2024. 24/7 and Rivals released their final rankings last week. On3 Sports has released their final rankings this week. And On3 is all over Jordan Lyle. They have ranked Jordan Lyle as their top running back in the class of 2024. So they actually rank Lyle just ahead of Taylor Tatum, who signed with Oklahoma. Georgia signee Nathaniel Frazier is number 3. If you look through notable names on the list, remember Kevin Riley, who I still really like, but Kevin Riley, who was a Miami commit who flipped to Alabama. Kevin Riley ranks 6th. So On3 really likes Jordan Lyle. So does Don Solinger. So does Donno. So I'm looking forward to seeing him make an impact as a Miami Hurricane. All right. So Miami has 3 former players who are at the Senior Bowl this week. So he had the first Senior Bowl practice, I believe, was yesterday. And the other big thing you look at when players arrive at the Senior Bowl, you get everybody's measurements, because a lot of times the listings that guys have from their colleges, you fudge the truth a little bit, right? If a guy's listed at 6'3", he might really be 6'2". If a guy's listed at 250, he might really be 243 or something, right? A lot of times those listings paint the best possible picture. They do not lie about the listings at the Senior Bowl or the NFL Scouting Combine, East-West Shrine Game, stuff like that. So here's how Miami's players actually measured up at the Senior Bowl. Cam Kinchens, 5'11", 206. So maybe a little bit shorter than I thought he was officially. James Williams, 6'4.3", so almost 6'4.5". I think he was listed 6'5", so that's close. But 230 pounds. James Williams, 230 pounds. Now, he's actually, I think he was around 220-ish was his playing weight this past year. So Williams is up about 10 pounds, and there's a reason for that. This guy, he was not sitting on the couch eating pizza or anything for the last couple months. It was tactical, the weight that James is putting on, because he's working out this week at the Senior Bowl. He's working out as a linebacker, because that's what NFL scouts want to see him play. NFL scouts and NFL coaches want to see him as a linebacker, because he's got the coverage skills of a safety, but he's got the body of a linebacker. So they, the idea of his size and abilities and his coverage skills playing the linebacker position, NFL scouts and coaches see that as the most optimal place for him to play. He obviously did get plenty of snaps in that sort of a role at Miami, but was primarily a safety and primarily listed as a safety. So he's making that transition. It's not only like a mental transition for him to kind of pick up a new position, but also the physical transition of getting a little bit bigger. So I thought that was notable. Javion Cohen is also at the Senior Bowl, and his measurements seem pretty much on point with what we thought he was at Miami. The former Miami starting left guard, 6'4", 319 pounds. Now, I was going through some day one reviews on Bleacher Report, and there is a glowing review for Cam Kinchens from his first day. I know that, again, he came in, not the biggest guy, 5'11", 206, but here's his day one review. Kinchens looked like the best safety on the field, they wrote. It's only one day, but his status as the top-ranked safety in this year's draft class may not come into question, they say. He showcased his versatility in man coverage as a deep safety or filling the alley in the run game. That versatility on the back end should continue to appear throughout the week. So that's about as glowing a review as you can get. When they're calling you the best guy at your position in the first day of practice, for those like me who are rooting for Miami's former players to get drafted as high as possible, you love to hear that on Cam Kinchens, who's, hopefully going to be day one, round one, or, day two, which would be second or third round at the very worst, that he's out there turning heads and impressing people at the Senior Bowl. The review on Javion Cohen's first day was not nearly as good, which, you hate to see it. I don't know if, you can't necessarily trust one man's opinion, but this is what they wrote about Javion Cohen's first practice. Cohen looked stiff and labored during the one-on-one run and pass portions of practice. He struggled to uncork and deliver any real power on defenders, leaving him either stalemated on contact or overextended when defenders attempted to slip off the block. That matches some of what's been seen on film, but he needs to play with better leverage and burst throughout the rest of the week to unlock his size and natural power that shows up in spurts. So hopefully, he can bounce back from that, because listen, the Javion Cohen that I saw on the field at Miami this past season, one of the best offensive linemen in the country. So hopefully he can live up to that status and cement that status. Now, they didn't write this Bleacher Report article. They did not write a review on James Williams. They did post an interview with James that you can check out, but they didn't give like a review of his day one performance. So I haven't heard too much about how he did in that practice, but I will be asking some folks because I do know a couple of people who are there in Mobile cover. I'm not sure if they're specifically watching James, but if anyone has any thoughts, I'm going to try to find those out over the next couple of days. An interesting recruiting tidbit. Miami is I know they're trying to flip plenty of players who are committed elsewhere because Mario does not give up, but Miami's going after a player who's long time been verbally committed to Auburn, and the way that they tried to make an impression on this young man, it's awesome, and it reminds me of what Nick Saban used to do in South Florida. So we'll talk about that and more when we come back. We're not done yet, my friends. You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. And I know you're keeping it locked to Jace Medical. I know we come to sports for an escape, but can we talk for a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin. This is scary. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if my wife or my son got sick while a supply chain issue keeps them from getting the life-saving medication that they need. Thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jace Medical. The Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among others. This stuff can happen to any of us. So visit jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jacemedical.com and use code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order at Jace Medical. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're free wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey app. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports today. Locked On has launched the first ever 24/7 streaming sports YouTube channel. It's going on right now. It's going on an hour from now. It's going on 24 hours a day. Check out Locked On Sports today. You've got the national and local experts of the Locked On Network breaking down all the biggest stories in sports. You'll see me turn up there time and time again at Locked On Sports today. So I was reading a story on 24/7 this morning about, Miami trying to flip an Auburn commit, defensive lineman, top 24/7 guy, I think a 4-star, Malik Autry, who's been committed to Auburn, which is 20 minutes away from his hometown in Alabama. He's been committed since February of 2023. So you're talking about a year he's been verbally committed. This guy is 6'6", 280-pound defensive lineman. He's the number 89 player and the number 7 defensive lineman in the class of 2025. Miami visited him on campus within the past few days. He says, man, it went good. They landed the helicopter, which is always great. He told Inside the U. Oh, man, I remember, this was years ago, back when Miami had no budget, right? You're right. Miami's only had a budget for like the last 2 years, right? But before Miami devoted any sort of a budget to recruiting resources, now you've got coaches hitching rides on private jets. You've got Mario Cristobal landing helicopters on fields. I remember 6-7 years ago, I used to get so annoyed when Miami couldn't do any of that stuff. Like you had Manny Diaz was like taking Ubers, right? You couldn't do any of that stuff. And then Nick Saban would always land the helicopter at American Heritage and St. Thomas and Miami Central. Like Nick Saban would land the helicopter at the big Miami high schools. And I used to get so mad. Like, how do we match up with this guy? Like, we're trying to keep our commits home. We're taking Lyfts and Ubers to schools, and Nick Saban's landing choppers. Well, guess what? Miami's got choppers now. How about that? So I thought that was pretty cool. Not that that's the end all be all, right? But it's when you're talking recruiting, it's great to be able to make an impression. Okay. He says, I had a great conversation with Coach Cristobal, and I'm planning to come down in March. So it will be great. So he's planning a visit in March. He says he's going to do a whole Florida swing in March where he's going to stop at Florida, UCF, and Miami. He says it will be sometime in March for spring practices and stuff. Try to come down for 2 days, one night stay, hang out, and then go through the whole thing, the practice, go through the whole day at Miami just to see what it's like. So again, this is Malik Autry, who's long been committed to Auburn. Miami's given him a long, hard look. We'll see if the Hurricanes can make some progress there. Today's going to be a busy day here on Locked On Canes. We're going to have at least one more episode today. Guys, I know we talked yet, and yesterday ended up being one of the best episodes we've ever done with Don Solinger. Don Solinger yesterday, legendary former Miami Hurricanes assistant coach. He pinch hit for Art Kehoe because for whatever reason, Art was going to join us yesterday. We couldn't track him down. Probably my fault. Art's going to join us today. So later today, we are going to have an episode with former Miami assistant coach, longtime offensive line coach, who has the distinction of the only coach who was on staff for all 5 national titles that Miami has won. From graduate assistant to offensive line coach, he was on the staff that won in 83, 87, 89, 91, and 2001. Art Kehoe has been a part of every national championship winning staff at the University of Miami, and he's going to be joining me and the Truth Teller later on today. And I say that may not be our only episode of the day. It all depends on the timing of all this stuff because, folks, I have tracked down a guy who we've been talking about a lot throughout the week, and that's Miami Hurricanes verbal commit quarterback Luke Nickel. Luke is going to be joining us either tonight or tomorrow morning on Locked On Canes. We're working out the time, but I cannot wait to chat with Luke, who is just he was a champion at Battle 7-on-7 this past weekend down in Miami. He was sporting the Miami cleats, the Miami chain he had on, so he's repping the U. He's been verbally committed. He is all in on Miami. Earlier this week, I think it was on Sunday, we spoke with Larry Bluestein, who said that Luke Nickel has risen. He's ascended to now becoming one of, in Blue's mind, the top 5 quarterbacks in the class of 2025, and he's verbally committed to Miami. So it's either going to be, keep your eyes out. If you follow us on social media, follow us on X at Locked On Canes. We'll let you guys know if that conversation, if it's going to come out tonight or if it's going to come out tomorrow morning. Either way, it is coming soon. We'll have Art Kehoe on later on today. So, guys, thank you so much for supporting the show. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to our channel. If you listen to the audio version, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your pods. So we'll be talking the next couple weeks. I know I'm not talking much basketball. Unfortunately, they lost again. Basketball team is down right now, all right? But we'll be talking a lot more football offseason. We'll be talking more basketball. Hopefully they win again soon. And we will talk to you guys next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.